Hello students, we are going to continue with the course English in Daily Life, in which we are going to continue with the block 3, that is media and entertainment. So in the last video that we looked at the unit 1 and 2, and today that we are looking at the unit 3 and 4 in the block 3. The unit 3 is about people at work. Let's see what it constitutes of. What are the objectives of this unit? Okay, so let's look at it one by one. One, the objective is to understand the work of a TV news anchor. So in everyday life that we watch television, and then usually that we watch news channels, that has become an integral part of our lives today, because that where the news channels have worked for 24/7. And then everyone, some or the other one in the home, they always glue to the TV, and then they're all obsessed with the news, right? So we will understand now how the TV anchors work. And the second objective is to familiarize ourselves with the vocabulary associated with TV news journalism. We just look at the news, we look at the programs in the TV, but we don't really get to know that what is the schedule of the TV news anchors, right? So how do we make sense of their work ethic, right? Also, how do they work? So that we will look at it in this unit very briefly. That how do we get to know the vocabulary associated with the TV news journalism? What kind of words they use, what kind of vocabulary that they are very familiar with, and what kind of vocabularies that we get to hear in everyday lives. The third objective is to be able to conduct a short interview. Like how, we've seen the TV news anchors conducting an interview. It looks very easy, when we watch it in a television. But what exactly, how exactly do they conduct a short interview? What kind of questions that they prepare before starting the news interview? So we'll look at these as well. The work of a TV news anchor. Okay, so let's look at the work of a TV news anchor. The work of a TV news anchor often begin with the looking over the scripts for the day for broadcasting news. So it always starts with that, right? Like, what is the content for today? What is the main stories that we have to broadcast today, right? So they always, they always look at that, before starting the news, because that they have to go on till the night, and then for that they need to have enough content, right? So that is why it is important for a TV news anchor to look over the scripts for the day for broadcasting news. The news anchors also need to research on the stories that they wish to report. This is very important, right? If the news anchors don't actually do a research on the stories that they wish to report, then we don't get an authentic report, right? For example, let's say that somewhere the crime takes place, and without the details of the crime, without doing any research on the crime, that if the news anchor just comes and tells something about the crime, that doesn't make any sense, So because that is why it is very important for them to do a research on the stories that they wish to report. Very crucial point, right? So the next, many of the news anchors also report live stories from the ground. They travel to different localities and places to gather special information and report from there. The groundwork, the groundwork for a new TV news anchor is very important. If you think that somebody just sits on the studio and then just report the news, that is not true. The news anchors has to go to the ground, and then they have to see what is happening on the ground, and then they have to report. Otherwise the news would not be authentic, and also the people who are watching the news, they would not really take that, right? So that is why they travel to different localities. That we have seen in the many news channels that people go into different localities and reporting from there. When they report from there, they always show the visuals of what is happening on the ground, right? So that is why it is very, and only when they when they show us visuals, then we will believe that this has happened and this is what the true reality is. Otherwise nobody is going to believe that, right? In order to believe something, it is important for us to report live stories from the ground, right? And they need to maintain a new network of contacts which allows them to cover news more widely. So this is a very crucial thing, right? So because that, if you go there somewhere to a remote place, and if you don't know anyone, and then you just come there and then you try to report, that just doesn't work, right? You have to know people in so many places that you need to maintain the contacts of those people, and that is how you make networks, right? So you call one person and the other person will call the other person, and that's how the networking works. And then that is how the majority of the authentic news would be covered. Otherwise, the news doesn't have any depth. Only with the contacts, only with the networking, the news becomes more authentic, and then the news is believed, right? So they are required to work in collaboration with videographers, photographers, editors, etc. to produce their work. It's always, for the TV news anchors, it's always important to work in collaboration with videographers, photographers, editors. That we have seen so many TV news anchors reporting from the ground. When they say that, here the news anchor, and then he tells the name, he or she tells a name, and then say with a photographer someone, right? So that is why it is very important to work in collaboration with videographers, and they're equally important. The role of the videographers and the photographers and editors, etc., they're equally important as the TV news anchors. So if, for example, if the video is not edited properly, then the audience would not get a very authentic information. What happens is that the audience would not get to see the visuals properly, would not get to hear something properly. So for all these things, the editors are very important, right? So that is why the videographers, photographers, editors are very important, and then the TV news anchor has to collaborate with them in order to report the news, right? And there are no fixed working hours for a TV news reporter. So there are no fixed working hours. For example, for a teacher or for a lawyer, so there are fixed working hours. They can work from 9 to 5, and then they can go back home, they can relax, they can do whatever they want. But it is not the same with the TV news anchor, because the TV news anchor, you must have seen in the television channels that the breaking news would be reporting like every single minute, and that is why it is important for a TV news reporter to be there on the ground, to be there in the studio all the time. So that is why there are no fixed working hours for a new TV news reporter. Even if they get call in the midnight that something is happening, and then which is an important information, that they would have to share this important information with the public. So that is why there are no fixed working hours. So it all depends on the context in which that they're reporting the news. For example, they might need to report early in the morning, in the middle of the night, or even during the holidays, right? So they don't even have holidays. So because some of the breaking news, they don't just stop, just because that it's holidays, the news won't stop, right? So that is why they have to cover in every holiday, in every time of the day, right? So that is why there are no fixed working hours for a TV news reporter. Let's look at some of the vocabulary associated with TV news journalism, right? So we always, we often hear these words when we watch the news. Some of the very important, news that, that always comes across is through, is through what they utter, right? So what they speak, what the news anchors speak. So let's look at some of the important words that the news journalism, TV news journalism always use. Okay, the first word, exhilarating. So you might have heard this very often in the TV news channels. And what does it mean? It gives you a strong feeling of happiness and excitement, right? I'm exhilarated today to cover this news. right? It gives a strong feeling of happiness and excitement. Affiliate, an organization which has a close association with or is a member of larger organization, right? So they always look at the affiliation. That's how they make sense of the word. They make sense of the context, right? So affiliate is a very common word that they use, and then they have it with the TV news journalism. Assignment. What is assignment? As you all know, that if you are studying in a college, if you are studying in a school, that that assignment is something, a particular task that you are officially given to do. Okay, so if you have given an assignment of writing a paragraph, so that you have given a particular task that you are officially given to do, right? So these are, but the assignment in the TV news journalism is always important, because every day you have one or the other assignment, and then they will they will go and complete the assignment every day. Investigate, very important, right? You might have heard about the word investigate. What is the meaning of the word? In order to examine the details of a situation, in order to find out what is happening, right? So you might have frequently heard of the word in a sentence, that the investigation is going on, the police investigation is going on, the news investigation is going on. So there are so many words. It is very important for the TV news journalism, in order to examine something. Internship, the media internship that you might have heard, that it is again a very important word which is associated with TV news journalism. To be trained under supervision, right? So internship is always to be trained under supervision. It's very important, right? For example, before entering into the major news studios, you always do a specific term of internship, right? You do a specific years of internship, and then that you enter the studio, the main studio, and then becomes the TV anchors, etc. Right? Fizzle out. What is fizzling out mean? Something that starts off strongly and ends weakly. There's so many news which happens like this. Something that starts off very strongly. They give such a build up to a story. That this happened and it's very important story. But what happens in the end, like the content is nothing, which kind of fizzles out, and then which ends so weakly. Sometimes it happens, right? So you think that it is a very important news to cover, and then you say that, but it's not really enough content is available, and it's not really something that has happened very drastically. So that is why it fizzles out, right? So these are some of the important vocabulary that you need to keep in mind, especially when we are talking about the TV journalism. And the other thing, the conducting an interview. How do the TV news anchors conduct an interview, and what we should keep what are the points that we should keep in mind while conducting the interview, right? So first one, be sure to pick out the right person, very important, right? Do your research about the topic and the person interviewed. For example, if you are calling a celebrity, then you should know what kind of person he is, and also you should know the background the person is from. So that is why it is important to do the research about the topic, about the person interviewed. Adequately prepare your questions. Very important to prepare your questions. Otherwise, when we are asking, so there won't be proper structure to it, right? So that is why it's always important to adequately prepare the questions that you are asking. All right. Make notes of the answers given by the interviewee. Right. For example, if someone is giving an interview, that you should ask the person to make notes of the answers. You should write down the answers that given by the interview, because based on that you can ask the further questions. So that is why it is very important to make notes of the answers given by the interview. Take permission from the interviewee if they would allow you to record. So it's always, it's part of the it is part of the journalism ethic, right? You always have to ask a person that whether if they would allow you to record, So you always ask a permission that is it, is it fine with you if I record, the audio record, if I do the audio recording, or the video recording. It's a part of journalism ethics. It's very important to take permission from the interviewee and make the interviewer feel comfortable during the interview. That is very important, right? Otherwise, what happens is that you might not get a response that you are expected. So that is why it is important to make the interviewee feel comfortable during the interview. For example, let's say you are a student and then you have been asked to interview a celebrity. So what you will do? First, you will have to make a list of possible questions to ask. If it is your favorite celebrity, let's say, that you will make a list of possible questions to ask, right? And some of the questions that you ask may pertain to their daily routine, like what do they do and what is their daily routine? When do they hit gym? When do they eat? These are some things that we always tend to ask a celebrity, right? Because many people are curious that what kind of lifestyle that they lead. Try and make the questions more insightful. This is very important. And before you frame the questions, do a basic research about the person. So it is very important to do a basic research about the person. So that is what we spoke in the last slide as well. This will allow you to form more meaningful questions about various aspects of their work, talent, etc. So when you do the research, that you know what kind of background that the person is coming from, so that will allow you to form more meaningful questions about various aspects of their work, talent, etc. And make sure to not ask that may be intrusive to their privacy. It's very important. So again, it's also it's also part of the journalism ethic that if you think the person will feel uncomfortable to answer certain questions, that make sure to not ask questions that may be intrusive to their privacy. Okay, it's also very important not to make them uncomfortable. Okay. So let's sum up the unit. So what have we discussed so far? In this unit, we first discussed what does the job of a TV news anchor entail, right? And then we looked at a few words associated with TV news journalism. Thereafter, we discussed how to conduct meaningful interviews, right? And in the end, what have we done? Curating and conducting interviews, like how to frame questions to ask in an interview. Conducting interviews are important for the job of a TV news anchor. That how important this job is for the TV news anchor. So we looked at it, right? So this is the end of the unit 3, the block 3. So now we will enter the unit 4, that is the smell of food, right? What are the objectives of the block 4? Sorry, block 3, unit 4, right? So let's look at the objectives. One, it is to understand, read, and make inferences from a text, right? So we will look at it through through the unit, the smell of food, that how do we read, understand, and make inferences from a text. Second objective is to evaluate a situation and offer personal opinion on the same. That how do we read a text, and then how do we interpret the text, and then how do we offer our personal opinion. So only when we interpret on our own that we get to offer personal opinion on the text. And what is the third objective? That is to learn how to write a story. That is very important, right? Like once we know how to read a text, how to interpret a text, the third thing that we do is that to learn how to write a story. The fourth objective is to learn to make and respond to offer. So once you know how to read a text, that you always tend to respond at what you have read, what you have interpreted, right? So that is what we will look at it in this unit. How to read and make inferences from a text. The first step is to read the text thoroughly. It's always, we always have to make sure that we read the text thoroughly. Only then we understand the text, and only then that we interpret the text, right? So we need to be mindful of the details mentioned in the text. So we need to be very mindful of the specific details that is mentioned in this text, right? How to do a close reading. When we do a close reading, what do? We always are mindful about certain details mentioned in the text. Only then that we can go depth in the text, into the text, right? So we should be able to carefully understand how each character is defined and what are their emotions described as, right? So, only when we read carefully that we understand how each character is defined and what are their emotions described as, right? So, if there is our favorite character, then how do we read the character, and then how do we make sense of a character, and how do we describe the emotions that character is feeling, that character is going through, right? So it is very important to do this, and this always happens when we are doing a close reading of the text, right? And then while reading, we should also note how the characters are developed through the course of the text and how are they shown to respond to various situations. How the characters are developed, for example, if we are reading a specific writer, for example, if we are reading a Salman Rushdie, then how the author is developing the characters, right? So it need not to be based on what the authors write about the characters. It is especially in your mind how the characters are developed, right? And then this happens through the course of the text. So you mention the characters, and then you look at how the characters is described, how in a due course of a time, and how are they shown to respond to various situations, right? So this happens only when we form it in a visual form, right? So always the text is one thing, but the characters, when we read, we always interpret, we always frame the characters in a visual form in our minds, right? So the characters are running through our mind, and then for that, how the characters are developed and how are they shown to respond to the various situations, these are very important. As we complete reading the text, we need to ask ourselves, what did the author exactly wish to convey from the text, right? So especially when we complete reading the text, we always try to ask the question to ourselves, okay, so now we have read the text, fine, it made sense. What exactly author is trying to convey from the text, right? So if we do not make sense of what author is trying to convey, then we fail to read a text. So that is why it is very important to always keep in mind that what exactly author wished to convey from the text. And the next important aspect is that how can we offer our opinions on a text, right? We talked about how to read a text, how to interpret a text, and now we will look at how can we offer our opinions on a text, right? So we can start with the theme of the text, for example. How the theme appealed to us, or how we found it relevant. We will note down these things, when we completed reading the text, that what is the theme of the text, and then how the theme appealed to us, right? So what made us remember the theme, right? So what made us really appealing? What made the theme really appealing? And then how we found the theme relevant. The style of writing can be looked thereafter. We can talk about it we can talk about it if the writing was lucid and easy to understand. That is very important, right? It is very important for the authors to keep in mind that the writing is lucid and easy to understand. Only then the readers are able to understand quite easily, right? So we can then discuss which characters we liked, which we found could have been developed further, etc. That we discussed even in the previous slide, that how do we discuss the characters we liked, and we found how the characters we found could have been developed further. So that is very important. It's not only important to analyze the characters, it's also important to look at the loopholes in which the authors have fallen into, and how we can take it further, right? So how do we how the characters could have been developed further. So it is also important to look at that. And in the end, we may also offer our opinion on which areas, according to us, the author should have focused on more. Again, it is not only confined to the characters, development of the characters. It also could be that, which opinion, on which areas according to us the author should have focused on more, right? For example, if the comic element is missing in a text, that it is very important to point out that this is what is missing in the text. That is how we read the text very thoroughly. So that is why it is not only important to summarize the text, but it is also important to read the text critically. Only then that we can offer our understanding of the text, and then our opinion about the text, which we find important. Now let's look at how grammar, used to and would are used. The term used to and would are often used in writing. Let's see what are the correct usage of these terms, right? Used to and would. The words would and used to are used to illustrate actions which were regularly done in the past, right? So we all know about that. Used to express a state or habit in the past as contrasted with the present, right? And then, for example, we used to live in the house. My mother used to bake cakes on everyone's birthday, right? So used to always express a state or habit in the past as contrasted with the present. So we always contrast with the present, and that is how we use used to. The word would can also express past habit, but with a sense of characteristic predictable behavior. How? Let's see the examples. She would carry her little dictionary to all the meetings. When asked a question, I would just clam up as a young boy, right? Look at these two examples. She would carry her little dictionary to all the meetings. So here we use would to express past habit, but with a sense of characteristic predictable behavior. So we can predict this behavior throughout, right? And how do we write a story? To write a story, we need to use our imagination and observe everything around us carefully, and that is how some of the points may help us write better. Let's look at the points that we need to remember. That a story has characters, that we looked at the characters and how do we read the characters. So that is why it is important to have the characters, each with his our own personality and characteristics. Second, conversation between the characters, very important. Events that happen in certain time and place, very important again. If we do not know what the events are happening at a certain time or place, then we would not able to frame a story. And perhaps the problem that drives the story forward, very important, right? That only we looked at it even during analyzing the story. What are the problems that drives the story forward? And of course, a very important statement, a way the problem is solved or not solved. A particular exciting moment or event called the climax of a story, very important, right? When there is no climax, then the readers would not come to know that how it has ended, or it just looks very abrupt, right? And in the end, it is very important it ties the plot together. Only then that will make sense of a story. Otherwise, it would just be a very absurd story, right? It does not have an ending, it does not have a start, it does not make any sense to a reader. So that is why it is very important to have the plot that ties the story together. So we need to remember all this when we write a story, and if you are willing to write a story, if you are interested in writing a story, you need to keep all the points in your mind. Okay, so let's sum up the unit 4 of the block 3. That in this unit, our main intention was on reading and writing stories. We looked at how to read a text, and then how do we read the stories, how it is important to write the stories, how it is important to read the stories, how do we analyze the stories. We looked at all this in this unit. We talked about how we can read stories and make inferences. How do we interpret the stories? Further, we discussed on how we can form and give our opinions on stories, right? So we expressed out how critically that we have to look at the stories. We then explored how we can write stories by ourselves, right? Only when we know that like when you know how to read stories, only then we can think of writing a stories. Then we explored about that as well. Finally, that it is very important to read the story, and then and that will help you to write a story by yourself, right? So with this, let's end this unit and the block. So we ended the block 3, unit 3 and 4. Hope you liked it, and hope it will be of a help for your examinations in the in the future for anything. Okay, thank you so much.